Welcome to Kibbe on Liberty. Gia, welcome.
Oh, hello.
It's
I'm very proud to be here.
Thank you for flying 25 hours from the country of Georgia just to do my show.
Yeah, I'm proud, and really interested to take part in and bring my messages to American people who can be kind of in illusions what is socialism and what is communism. And I myself lived half of my life in communist time, and when somebody tells me about my childhood, I hate my childhood because it was so terrible. Nobody can imagine this, so I would not recommend to try this to anybody.
So we have known each other. I was trying to figure it out before this afternoon. I think we've known each other since about 2008, something like that.
Yeah, maybe.
Yeah. But I couldn't figure out exactly. But
Yeah.
I want to start with the story. You're from the country of Georgia, and I have to say the country of Georgia so that people don't think you're from Atlanta.
Yes.
But Terry and I, we were coming back from Batumi, Georgia, at a conference that you and your friend Pata had organized. And this was in the beginning of lockdowns and COVID.
Yeah.
And we're coming through immigration back into the United States. And the immigration agent said, "Where are you coming from?" And Terry said, "Georgia." And he said, "Germany?" And she said, "No, Georgia." "Is that near Germany?"
Yeah.
"No, it's near Russia." And our government officials, and perhaps many Americans don't know exactly where Georgia is, but you're south of Russia and west of
Black Sea, on the Black Sea.
yeah.
And north to Turkey and Armenia, and west to Azerbaijan. This is all our surroundings. But there is one also, another big player. This is Iran. So
Yeah.
it must be counted because we have lots of Iranians living in Georgia now.
Yeah. Georgia is interesting to me. It's one of our favorite places in the world, and even though it is extremely east from an American perspective, it feels very Western to us. The culture, the food, the wine, which we're going to talk about next. But it's a beautiful place, and it has a beautiful modern history of pushing back against Soviet oppression. And I want to talk about that. And like growing up in the Soviet Union is probably something, as you alluded to, it's hard, I think, for young people to even conceive of what it was like
Yeah.
dealing with real authoritarianism, and being afraid to speak your mind, and wondering whether or not you get to eat that night, and all of these realities that you live through. But before we do that, we have to open a bottle of wine.
Oh, great.
So we were having dinner last night, planning our next big adventure. You are an advisor to our forthcoming documentary, which we're filming in a couple months, about Georgian wine.
Yeah.
And this is one of your friends that you introduced me to, a winemaker named Mehrab, and this is where this idea came from. He is this tremendous entrepreneur who is trying to bring back a lot of the ancient Georgian wine traditions, and was inspired to do so after the fall of the Soviet Union. He cobbled together the money to buy back the land that Stalin had stolen from his family. So it's a cool story about wine, but it's also a cool story about perseverance.
Yeah, the story of winemaking in Georgia is a very long one. I mean, they believe that Georgia was the very first place to start winemaking. It was not Georgia at that time, of course, but what was more interesting that during Soviet times, this industry became another type of plant industry, which was thinking only about the quantities, not about the quality. So then we could produce maybe 20 times more wine that time, but it was not really wine. In reality, it was kind of strange liquid.
The technical term is swill.
Yes.
Yes.
So then, after Soviet Union collapsed, we needed to find new markets, new people who would be interested in Georgian wines. It is not going very easily because they destroyed all the traditions and the strong um, understanding what is the wine in reality. But we are now trying, including my friend Merab, who is really dedicated person. He wants to make sure that we revive all the traditions and not only traditions but also the varieties of grapes. During Soviet times, there were few varieties the planning authorities were pushing because those varieties were most productive varieties, not the best ones, but the most productive. I mean, more more grapes to harvest in September. And then there was also something even much worse than this, that when there was a plan coming from Moscow that you should harvest 1 million tons of grapes, 1 million tons, you can imagine. So then, and you have not so much, not enough for that plan. What would you do? Some people would add some sugar with big containers, bringing them directly, and some adding even the branches of the trees to make sure it's enough heavy. That
It didn't matter what was in the wine; it just mattered that they met the volume quota.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah. And then they were reporting to Moscow that we produced that much wine and it's enough for entire Soviet Union. And also, it was like, as Soviet Union was the kind of occupier of Eastern Europe, so it was obliging other nations in this kind of so-called brotherhood to consume Georgian or Moldovan wines, and this was the reality. So, and what I remember from my young years when I was a student, you would not convince my friend or anybody to go and buy bottled wine in the shops. And obviously, all the shelves were full of wine and vodka in Georgia, differently from Russia, by the way. But everybody knew that this was, and so this created another movement that people started making their own wine at home everywhere, not only in the countryside but in the cities as well. So every family in Tbilisi, the capital city, were thinking how to grow some wine trees in their yards or on the balconies or everywhere to harvest at least 200 kilograms of grapes, and they could say that I have my wine. So
Yeah.
So it's as strong as this feeling. Yeah.
You still get wine. It's at the time illegal to make your own wine, but you
everything
wouldn't
was
drink the
illegal.
Soviet wine.
Yeah,
Everything was illegal.
illegal. Yeah, nothing was. Allowed to do, including, for instance, private tutoring of the school children. It was totally forbidden. But then those guys who needed to find those illegal activities of some people, they needed their children to be educated also. So they stopped then fighting these private tutors. And there were several different examples of illegal activities. Then Georgia was one of the champions of Soviet Union in illegal business and hidden economy, because the big factory could have smaller internal factory who was stealing resources from the big factory and producing something on the side. But then when in the 1970s some leaders announced a war against the corruption, they were not only imprisoning those illegal businessmen, but the rule was that if somebody was stealing more than 100,000 rubles, there was the execution rule. Nobody could escape this. And for the shame of Soviets, they were punishing these illegal entrepreneurs with a capital punishment. So it was such a tragic thing that they were punishing people for producing something. This was.
Free the People is embarking on our most ambitious project to date to document and expose the lies behind the greatest public health failure in my lifetime. We're talking to insiders with firsthand knowledge of the government's role in funding, creating, and then covering up the COVID-19 virus in our exclusive new documentary series, The Cover-Up. But I need your help. We won't get to the bottom of this scandal alone, so I'm asking viewers to crowdsource any information that could be helpful to our investigation. If you're watching this, you already know what the government did during lockdowns was unforgivable. Help us get to the truth and prevent it from ever happening again. To get involved, go to freethepeople.org/coverup. That's freethepeople.org/coverup. The truth is out there. Yes. So let's get into that story, but Gamaljuice.
Gamaljuice.
Which is cheers in Georgian.
Yeah.
Is that correct?
Yeah, it in reality means to your victory, Gamaljuice.
Okay.
Because I was telling to Matt that Georgia survived 10 different empires, big and very harsh empires, not soft empires like Austrian Empire, but really harsh empires. But then from maybe like 14th, 15th century, it was all the time fights. So our population declined a lot after these fights. But then this was in the tradition to meet each other, Gaumarjus, saying Gaumarjus like to your victory, and then the toast starting with Gaumarjus. This means to your victory.
So this, just so people know, like it's probably hard to find this bottle in the United States. Sometimes he imports, but the winery is Angara, and this is a classic Georgian red wine, very, very structured, very beautiful, called Saparavi. And you'll hear more about that because we're going to make a whole documentary about this stuff.
Yeah. One of the things we can say about Saparavi that it was not really favorite because it was not really giving much grapes from 1 hectare of land. So everything was calculated this way, that how much we can harvest from 1 hectare. 20 centers, it's not big, we need 25. And as Soviets understood that people needed some incentives, they would be pushing them that you should have socialist competition. Socialist competition. Well, sounds interesting, but it was really stupid, of course. And the end of the social competition was, of course, corruption, that the guys who would bribe somebody better than they were winning the competition. And the award was the red flag of with the face of Lenin on that red flag, and some money also for, little money. But so socialist competition was the kind of substitute to the capitalist competition.
Yeah.
But what's the lesson from this is that in reality, of course, the Soviet leadership knew very well that humans need incentives, but the first incentive obviously was that they started killing everybody who was not surrendering to them.
More of a disincentive.
Yeah. Yeah. So if you don't work, then we will kill you.
Yeah.
So this was the first thing. But then it did not work. They took people to gulags, to some special camps to work there. But yeah, you can keep people as slaves, but after a while you understand that the productivity of the slaves are very, very little, and then they understood that people still, even in socialism, they need incentives. So they invented such incentives like the socialist competition, but also like they understood very well that any economy needs some innovation and invention of something and to improve the production things. But so instead of having the normal way of investment in innovation, it was like, so you invented something and you could get a special something, I don't know how to call this,
a badge.
Yeah, badge.
Trophy.
Saying that you were the distinguished innovator.
A good citizen.
Yeah. And from this you could have, for instance, 500 rubles as a kind of award, and then you are totally forgotten. And who could do that kind of innovation if you can have only 500 rubles? But it was not only with the innovators, but there were the badges for a distinguished driver of taxi, for instance, or distinguished teacher, or anything, distinguished barber, like this. So and it was like to encourage people that if you want to be a distinguished driver, then you should work better or something like this.
Sounds like a primitive version of the Chinese social credit system.
Yes.
Where you either get a badge because you're a good citizen, or they just kill you.
Yeah, but
which are stark choices.
Yeah, who studied from whom? This is the question. By the way, as I'm having a chance, I would encourage everybody to watch a very famous documentary video about Soviet Union. This is Soviet Story. And in that documentary, you can find lots of interesting things about Soviets, but also Nazis. That Nazis were in fact the partners of Soviets, and the many people cannot even guess, and they have no information. They are not maybe interested. I don't know why, but then
they had a secret pact.
Yeah. But before that, Soviets were the first to invent the labor camps. Not the Nazis, but the Soviets invented. And in that film, you can see that German Nazi SS people were coming to Soviet Union to study their experience of the labor camps, exactly labor camps. And this was very open and happy cooperation between two sides. Until the end of the story was that Hitler thought that those guys were competitors in the same sphere of influence. Like in reality, Nazi Party was the National Socialist Party of Workers. That's the very important thing to know about it.
Two flavors of the same tyranny.
Yes, absolutely. And I don't believe that Soviet Union was anyhow better. Even in the sense of the racism and everything. Like racism was very widespread in Soviet Union. The Stalin's way of understanding of ethnicities, etc., was put in one book. He called this national issue. In reality, he was just repeating the ideas of several different social democrats of those times. He was, when I was once in Vienna, Austria, a guide was saying that Stalin was coming to Vienna to study national issue from very famous social democrat ideologist Kautsky, and they said that he was studying from him. So it's not really something enormous. The social democrats, and especially this Bolshevik side of the social democrats, they were really racist, and they had completely racist theory about the ethnicities and minorities and like this. Unfortunately, many things are now still in the air in the world. So.
At Kibbe on Liberty, freedom is a lifestyle 24/7, something you live and breathe and wear every day. If that describes you, you need the very best Liberty swag in the market today, just like this shirt I happen to be wearing. Go to freethepeople.org/KOL and check out our exciting merch. You too can love Liberty and look cool. So let's take a step back. You are born and grow up in the Soviet system, and it's hard for me to imagine as an American and growing up in a system where you're afraid to speak, and you're subject to all of these controls, and you're probably struggling to put food on the table. When did you realize that there was something fundamentally wrong with the Soviet system?
Yeah, it was when I was at the high school, by the way. It was not after I graduated the high school. At the high school, I had a classmate with whom we were sometimes discussing these kind of things, because my father was a really distinguished engineer in the metallurgic plant, and his father was even in different business. He was going to Siberia for the wood materials, let's say, and our fathers were very well understanding the internal issues. But what I guessed myself was that the irresponsible heavy workers could have much higher salaries than the very responsible engineers in the factory. So, and those engineers could be having absolutely poor life if they were not really addicted to stealing something and overcoming the ethical things. Then they could not. For instance, very important.
So to be clear, the workers who knew how to play the game and manipulate the system,
yes, absolutely,
they succeeded in a bureaucratic way, whereas the producers and the innovators suffered.
Yeah, and there is one absolutely definite thing with socialism, and I wrote about this in the beginning of 2000, that socialism, everybody should understand this. Socialism immediately means corruption. Because what is socialism? It's kind of avoiding market rules. Because if you are good with your abilities and your skills, why would you try to avoid market rules? You'd better go to the market. But if you are not good with this, then you are looking for government solutions, and of course it is creating the corruption. But it was corruption everywhere. The bribery, corruption can be everywhere now in the world. It's not only bribery, it's, I believe, all kind of political activities. But if you have more government, that means that immediately you have more corruption. There is no chance to avoid this. And it's not when some people think that, oh, there is no corruption or something in Denmark or Sweden, or you can go and observe. In reality, there is much corruption there. And the strange thing is, how can they survive this? But on the other hand, the Soviet Union system was based on corruption, and without corruption, nothing was working in reality. Because I described the story of renovation of your apartment in Soviet Union, and I said first of all that it was not yours. All the apartments belong to the government. Second, that you had no right to renovate it. And then there was no, chance to buy the materials for renovation. The such kind of shops were just empty. You go and nothing is available. But then what could you do is, this was the absolutely normal thing, that you could go to the construction site and bribe somebody who was constructing a building and taking the extra materials. And those guys, they had extra materials to sell on the side. And how could they achieve this? Because they were bribing somebody upper, and those guys were bribing somebody upper, and there were some construction bureaus who were making the projects of construction, and they were the first people to bribe, because if you bribe them, they could write that this construction needs not 10,000 but 11,000 bricks, and 1,000 is extra, and if somebody comes, you sell, and then this money goes to pockets of that guy, pockets of the minister, pockets of the other, some politicians, etc. So this was, for the perspective of organization, it was brilliantly organized. But of course, this was the huge and stupid system.
So you saw this corruption, and the fact that people are diverted away from their natural abilities, even in high school.
Yeah, I thought one thing, that it was obligatory to study utopia and such kind of things in our schools. And when I read utopia, I said that there were correct questions, that if everything is common, then why would people work at all? It was a correct question. And from these kind of things, I started looking at this critically, and especially you start thinking about this critical, because you live such a poor life that you have questions. Why we live such a poor life? Why? What's our fault? Then when I graduated the high school, maybe because I don't remember, it was long ago, and but they did not accept me to the League of Young Communists, so-called Komsomol. And when I applied to study at the Polytechnical University, they said, "Oh, you are not a member of Komsomol. How could you?" Because everybody were, automatically becoming the. And I said, "I don't even understand why." But then
you didn't have the right communist merit badge.
Yeah, maybe. And then the second,
or you asked a question.
Yeah, I was asking wrong questions.
You're not allowed to ask the question.
Next thing was that when I was the second grade student at the Polytechnical University, we had lots of quarrels with the teacher of political economy, and he told me that please don't come to my lectures. Otherwise, I need to report about you, because if I don't report, somebody else will report about you and me also. And I was very happy not to attend his lectures anymore, because we were really quarreling about how how can this kind of system work. Then from that moment, I understood that I was more interested in economics than in the technical things like engineering. And then I graduated the second university also as an economist, and that time I was already working, and this was my very first victory in my life, that in 1988 we had the examination at our office, and I got the worst mark because I said that the Soviet Union was collapsing, because I saw everything. It was not like I was such a clever guy or I was such an educated economist or something like this, but every day we would receive hundreds of information of failures of the production companies to supply other productions with their supplies, and they were calling us. We were going to check what was wrong, and it was everyday thing, and sometimes we were laughing at this kind of situation. And then I decided it was collapsing. There was Ronald Reagan's policy, Margaret Thatcher, of course. They did a lot to change this environment in the world, but it was collapsing because everything was wrong. The first thing was that it in the 90s or 2000s it would collapse anyhow. And what was the thing that people could not believe that the nation with such enormous, resources like Soviet Union, including of Russia, Kazakhstan, Azerbaijan, and others, and it could collapse. But because of wrong system, it collapsed. This is very important to understand. That it was such a wrong system that they tried a lot to invent incentives for people, as I was saying, like distinguished driver. It did not work, of course. You have the badge of the distinguished driver, and you go home, and your children are asking, now what can we eat?
Yes.
This is most important. And so what I observed that we had lots of information from elsewhere, and for instance, one information was that there was a deficit of train cars everywhere, because you have the production factory, and it needs to send materials to somebody else, and then there was no train car, and you were standing waiting, and then some information from Siberia that approximately 65,000 train cars are located in one place, and nobody has idea how to send them back to the factories. And
this sounds like a chapter out of Atlas Shrugged.
Yeah, absolutely. And there was also very interestingly, I discovered this after a while when I read Friedrich Hayek, that he was absolutely correct about.
By the way, we drink every time we quote Hayek on this show.
Great. To Hayek. He was right about information, importance of the information, that people who never had any touch with this, they need to know that there's no price system in Soviet Union. Prices were decided by somebody. There was a special price committee in the Moscow government, which was issuing the prices, like how much should be the price of a telephone. They were sitting and calculating, and okay, 25 rubles. Then where is the 25 ruble telephone? There is no available in you go to the shops and nothing. But anyway, some goods which were of the direct consumption for the people. They were heavily subsidized, and the goods which were regarded as the goods for wealthier people who were the wealthier. But anyway, so these were they had higher prices than the cost of the production. So this was really one of the very important problems also, that there was no price system, because price system is the major thing for understanding what is demanded and what is better to supply. But there was also another thing that people can think that central planning is easy, especially now we have computerized world and digitalized world, and it's so easy, somebody can think, but it's not easy, and it's not about if you can collect information. It's not about that in reality, because I swear that Soviets tried to collect that information. In the office where I worked, there was a special computing center.
Where are you working, by the way?
This was the so-called GOSNAB. It was the executive unit for the Gosplan. Gosplan was the highest planning authority, and the GOSNAB was to execute the plan. So
you're a technical economist working in the planning agency.
Yes, absolutely.
Okay.
And then there was a huge attempt to collect information, but for the people who never had a touch with this, you can imagine what is this, that you are collecting information, for instance, what kind of garments people like to wear. And then when you find this information, then you need to report to somebody who makes a plan, and somebody to approve the plan, and somebody to send this plan to the producers. And when you produce it and when you bring it to the customers, it's already outdated and nobody wants to wear that. That's very, very short way to explain why it was wrong. That nobody can really follow the demands of the people when it comes about the consumption goods. But
you can't know what people want unless you allow them to choose freely.
Yeah, for instance, I believe that Chinese government's effort to make sure that everybody were wearing the uniforms, it was not accidental. That because if you tell the people that you are the warriors of the communism, then you tell them that you should wear uniforms if you are the warriors. But if they have their opinion or their vision, what they want to, which color, uniform, but which color, then that's already complex. Because how can you provide that exactly that number of green uniforms, or exactly that number of red or blue uniforms? That would be, and sizes and everything. So it's like somebody thinks that he is a god somewhere, and then I know 10,300,200 people want to wear blue the uniforms, and exactly 17 million like this want to wear green. So then to make it more easier, they said that you are the soldiers, forget about the taste, forget about the colors, you are the warriors of the communists. This was not really accidental. And it brings me to one thing that if communists in China or everywhere, they believed in the ideology. as I understand, what they had in their mind was that they could cheat people with these kind of Marxian ideas, not really understanding them, not really following them, etc. But just it's like some in some periods of Christian churches that some priests would be cheating the local people that you don't understand anything. I am the boss here. I'll tell you what is Christianity.
So let me ask you a question. This is like at this point we're late 80s, maybe.
Yeah.
And there's three types of people in the Soviet system. There's the true believers, the Marxists, the socialists, the ideologues who believe that if we just implement this correctly, we can change the world. Then there's the bureaucrats and apparatchiks who are just playing the game. They're the ones that are like, okay, corruption is the game. Mm-hmm. I'm going to play the game and maximize my life as best I can in this system. And then there's just people trying to put food on their tables. How does that break out? How many true believers are in this system that you meet in your personal life?
So I think that it could be like one person out of 500,000 or even maybe 1 million. But
so no one really believes it.
No, and I don't know. Maybe this is difference. There is a difference between where. Because in Georgia, this could be that way, but in Russia, maybe more people would be addicted to some collectivist ideas, and they could be. And also, I think that in Russia, maybe even now, they think that this is the kind of their cultural part of their cultural identity, and some people still want to defend this wrong system from saying that you hate us, that's why you are saying this. But of course, everything was much worse, and they could observe this everywhere. But for instance, the very famous reformer of Soviet Union, Mikhail Gorbachev, he was, until his death, he was repeating that he was a socialist, and he never abandoned this idea. And when he became the leader of Soviet Communist Party, he thought that the only problem of socialism was that the people were all the time drunk. I don't know. I never lived in Russia to say more about this, but it was.
If I lived in Russia during these times, I would be drunk.
Yes, of course.
It's the only way to survive.
But he thought that if he stopped the alcoholism in Russia...
Yeah, he famously banned alcohol in Russia, right?
And this was not because that he was taking care about Russians who were drunk all the time, but he thought that if he stopped the alcoholism in Soviet Union, it would revive the forces of the socialism.
People work harder.
Yeah.
If they're not drunk.
Yes. This was, of course, a joke, so
I don't think Gorbachev really believed in socialism. I think he saw that it was dysfunctional, like you, but he couldn't say that out loud.
Yeah, because there is one difference between him and some other reformers in the Soviet Union, that he was always cheated by the surrounding guys that, we aren't still very good and something like this. And the role of Ronald Reagan was very powerful in here, that he was pushing very much, and then Soviet Union was out of foreign cash to buy butter and meat and everything. You need foreign cash. So then that moment, and the war in Afghanistan was also very costly to Soviet Union, and when they got away from Afghanistan, Soviet Union was already a very poor place and no money for. In the beginning of 80s, they introduced the food stamps. Like from the beginning, it was 600 grams of butter per person in Georgia, for instance, and maybe 500 grams of cheese per month, of course. You can imagine 300 grams, or so, and then it was diminishing every year because there is no production of good quality butter in the Soviet Union, and they needed to buy from Finland or somewhere else. So there was no cash, and you can. And then what I also believe that these reforms accelerated collapse of Soviet Union also, because you cannot reform socialism. It's impossible. You end it or it cannot be reformed. That's what Gorbachev really could not understand, that he was trying to reform, but in reality, how can you reform the system which is not really anyhow any good in any percent or anything? So, and he tried to introduce some little bit market rules, and it converted into much bigger bribery, much bigger avoidance of paying for the goods, etc. And also there was one interesting thing that some companies were allowed to start exporting their goods. In exchange of that, if they were selling something abroad, they needed to bring the foreign cash to the government. And then in reality, these factories started keeping their cash abroad in the foreign banks. So it was not returning back to Soviet Union. So it's accelerated, as I say. The rule was that you could sell only 15%, 1/5, of your production goods abroad. But who could control this? It was 50 immediately, and everybody started selling everything possible which could be sold immediately. Everybody rushed to the. So it's a real picture of Soviet Union. And one final thing, when people think that there was any kind of real production in Soviet Union, I said that in reality, if it is about production factories, then the worth of the goods they were producing was, near to zero, maybe even negative, of course. But
what's the Soviet era car that everyone makes fun of?
Yeah, for instance, there was a big truck factory in Georgia, and it was so low quality that it was assigned to take only the cotton, and the trucks were produced in Georgia, and they were needed in Central Asia, because there were plantations of cotton in Central Asia, and those trucks needed to go thousands of kilometers from Georgia to Kazakhstan or Uzbekistan, and then they could not travel more than 200 meters without
they couldn't get
major repairment immediately.
That's funny.
They leave the factory, and after 200 meters it needed repairing. So and then also the Soviets were stealing a lot from Germany and others, the technologies for their cars. But then also they bought the production of the Fiat from Italians. And from the beginning it was okay, but step by step it was worse and worse quality. And the end of Soviet Union, it was so bad quality that nobody was buying them. and even Soviet, and because of that they could not pay to the workers of this factory, and then they were so there were no money to pay to the workers. What can you do? They were granting them the tires and some parts of the car, and they were going to the streets and selling those parts everywhere in the streets. So it was
so what year is
funny, but
what year is this?
It's like 1988, 1989. So when you were observing this, you did not need to be a genius to understand it was collapsing. That's why I'm saying that it was my victory to say that it was collapsing, but because nobody was saying this, but nobody wanted to also believe that it would collapse that quickly, because in reality, Soviet Union made us also dependent on each other. That there was cotton in Uzbekistan, and then they needed trucks to bring this cotton somewhere. And if there were no trucks, then they could not harvest the cotton, and somebody could not make the garments out of the cotton. And it was everybody were interdependent to each other. So one day it collapsed, and everybody went by themselves, and then everything really collapsed.
Thank you for joining me today on Kibbe on Liberty, and for being part of our fiercely independent audience. Every week, my organization, Free the People, partners with BlazeTV to bring you this show. My guests bring smart perspectives on everything from current events to timeless philosophical debates. If you like what you hear, go to freethepeople.org/KOL and support Kibbe on Liberty so we can continue to produce these honest conversations with interesting people. Now, let's get back to it. So you are a technical economist working in a Soviet-controlled government agency, and the whole thing collapses. How did you go from there to finding Friedrich Hayek?
It's a very interesting thing that at the end of 1980s, Soviets translated Road to Serfdom, and it was published in the journal of, they call this Vопроsi Ekonomiki. This is economic issues. And I was a frequent user of library, and reading this particular journal, because nothing else was available. And I found, and I was reading, then there was a copy machine, I made the copies. Then later in 1991, I discovered, it was in Russian language, of course, and I discovered another book of Friedrich Hayek, the last one, which is End of Socialism, like this. But the Road to Serfdom, I believe this is one of the most powerful things. I was reading and I was happy, because I thought that you could feel that you were alone when you have lots of doubts and etc. But you cannot talk to anybody about this, and nobody knows anything about this. You can talk, but nobody knows anyway.
Yeah.
And these kind of books were absolutely not available in Soviet Union in any language. But in the major discovery, by the way, was first of all that he was saying that the socialism and Nazism were the same roots. And I was thinking about this a lot at that time, and then I was happy to discover that I was right. I was right about many things, but I was right about this particular thing. But in 1989, we established one of the first non-government offices with my friends, Pata, and some other friends. This was the Association of Young Economists, which was to protest Marxian economic education in Soviet Georgia.
And this is still a dangerous thing to do.
Yes, absolutely. And for instance, my major message to our let's say wrong professors was that you don't understand how the economy works, and I was saying that ordinary peasant or farmer in Georgia, Soviet Georgia, still Soviet Georgia, could have much easier understanding of economics, because I was saying that when they decide to plant something, they think not about how to grow, how to harvest, but how to sell it, which was not really understandable for Soviet Marxian professors. They thought that the major thing was to produce something, and maybe nobody needs them, but they are produced. Why you are against this? So, but it was 1989, and this group of 20 people, we were then disseminated between different things. I mean, some people went abroad, some people went to government offices, some into the business. Georgi, our friend from Chateau Mere, he was from the same group. And some people like Georgi, they started business immediately after Soviet Union collapsed, and they did not want to wait. And one interesting thing was also that Soviet Georgians were not really happy with Soviet Empire, because Georgia was forcefully incorporated in Soviet Union, and this was kind of very strong nationalist view that we wanted our separate state, and we did a lot for that. But on the other hand, if there was disbelief in communism among Soviet people, Georgia was, of course, number one. You can say that Ukrainians were maybe not so happy, or Baltic people, etc., but Georgians were behaving hatefully because there were lots of underground production factories, etc. Even with the capital punishment in 1970s, they still continued doing some illegal business in Georgia. It's enormous fact about that people, when they are addicted to entrepreneurship, they do this. They can go through any barriers. They are unstoppable. This is very important for people to understand, that you can invent socialism and communism, etc., but normal people behave normally. They want to have their own ideas, to promote their own ideas, etc., and doing business. So, and when everything stopped after Soviet Union collapsed, instead of crying for our great Soviet Union, which was giving us jobs, etc., they simply went to the streets and started new life, selling goods from their homes, exchanging, etc. Sometimes there was no money, and you could exchange something from your home into the bread or something like this. So, and it was very good characterization of my people. But then, if you ask me why we are not as rich as Estonians, for instance, we did lots of mistakes. First of all, with our nationalist ideas, believe we were too harsh to our very good citizens from Abkhazia and South Ossetia, but there was also a very harsh policy from Russia. They cut the electricity and natural gas supply to Georgia, and there were so many challenges. For instance, you were addicted that Moscow was deciding everything, and now you need to live by yourself. And okay, I'm happy, but I have no partners. I don't know anybody in the world, and I don't know what to buy, where to sell my goods. So it's completely new life without any preparations, etc. So it was, from the beginning, it was very hard. But one of the lessons from that time is not about economics, I mean, in poor sense of calculations and like this, but about the ethics. Because what the communists did was not simply like they killed millions, but as I was saying always, they were brutal pragmatists, this Soviet leadership. They knew, first of all, that if they kept the millions of property owners in Soviet Union, they would never stop. They would never stop, and they would fight Stalin, Lenin, or anybody. So then they started killing the property owners in the first row. It's for history of the world, it's somewhat like hidden, because when they are talking about the repressions in Soviet Union, they are talking mostly about repressions against so-called intelligentsia, because it was those guys were more well known. Property owners who were businessmen who are doing their business without any big names or something, they were just forgotten. And the Soviet leadership wanted to prove that those guys were bad. Now we kill them and we will be living better life. And this was the major way how to make poor people believing that if you eliminate this class of property owners, if you get rid of them, then everything will be okay. And nothing was okay, of course.
So I want to end with introduction, at least, to one of the guys who I would call him the Milton Friedman of Georgia. And I'll start with a story. We were doing very important empirical research, drinking wine in Kakheti with our new friends at Papari Valley. And we were talking about the Georgian reforms that happened once Georgia became independent. And I think you mentioned Kaha Bendukidze.
Yeah.
Am I saying that right?
Yeah.
Close. And he was a hardcore libertarian free market reformer who was kind of put in charge of the economic transformation and did a lot of the same things that Mart Laar did in Estonia, based on some of the same ideas. And that is one of the reasons why Georgia, on the Economic Freedom Index, does pretty well, despite all of these problems you're talking about.
Yeah, Kaha Bendukidze was an entrepreneur. He started his first businesses in Russia. He was one of the leaders of Russian Association of Entrepreneurs. But when it came time for reforms, he moved to Georgia, and he was very successful. I believe that he was mostly successful to implement these reforms, because when he came, it was not an empty space. We had lots of good ideas, and we published it a lot. I invited Mart Laar later, and
at this point, you and Pata have started a free market think tank.
Yes, in 2001.
Yeah.
So but Kaha was brilliant in implementation and convincing people. Most importantly, when we now think about the Argentinian president, who is in the same kind of situation, I believe. So for him, first thing is how to convince people in politics.
So Kaha was a bull like Milei.
Yeah. He needs to, first of all, to convince politicians that it's beneficial for them also. This is very hard work, the most problematic maybe for Milei now. But He was dedicated libertarian. He was thinking that what works, this is only free market. And you don't need many arguments. You can tell people that, tell me what other things can work. We know for sure this works, not because that somebody is so brilliant in the government, but because we have brilliant people there and they are doing their business, and that's all. And for instance, when last time I wrote a big piece about China, I was saying that the big mistake of Chinese Communist Party is that they think that all the achievements of current China is because of their great leadership. This is totally stupid. It's because people were more free, and 1 billion people with intellectual capacities can do any kind of changes. So, and if they now return back all these liberties, then there will be no future. They will be as poor as they were in past. And we experienced this, and I know what I'm talking about. It's impossible to have good life together with the total control of the population. It's just impossible thing. Yeah, but Kacha was exactly in time, because Georgia was already tired with lots of things. Especially, for instance, it can be very kind of impressive fact about Georgia that as we were one of the most corrupted nation, we were 133rd place in the Transparency International. With these free market reforms, we became one of the leaders in the world. Very quickly, we achieved, in 10 years, we were 41st place in that index of corruption perception. And what was the major thing Kacha was doing? He was just eliminating the pages, corruption dangerous pages from the legislation. We don't need this, we don't need this, we don't need this. And there is no rule, there is no legislation, there is no regulation, there is no corruption. Immediately. It does not need some theoretical calculations, etc. Second day, people go to bribe somebody in the office somewhere, and there is nobody, there is nothing to pay. And it's an end of corruption and bribery. This is why I'm saying that more socialism, more regulations, more taxes, this immediately means more corruption, of course, because if they want to avoid this, what can they do? They go and bribe somebody. Please close your eyes. I'm happy to pay that much, and then you close eyes. Nothing bad will happen with this. And of course, give me my money, my deal, and I will bring some money to the higher authorities, and that's how it works. So, by the way, I invented this approach by myself before Kacha came, and I was even in the big conference or anti-corruption conference in Kenya once, and I made a speech there that if you want to stop corruption in Africa, first thing you should do, this is eliminate your regulations. My experience tells me that it's the most efficient way to stop this.
Well, let's wrap it up there. Can you tell people where they can find your work? I think the New School has a website.
Yes, we have a website, but I'm mostly publishing my articles. There is a Eastern European network of libertarians. This is for liberty.eu.
Okay.
So I'm one of the bloggers there. I'm writing lots of articles there, and I encourage everybody to see my articles. For instance, one of the discoveries of mine was that labor laws cannot work in sports. I mean, in athletics, like football or basketball. And if your team is losing, so you should get away of the bad players. And how can you tell them that, oh, you are playing badly, but I know that
you're protected.
We are protected by labor laws.
Yeah.
Then all the system is collapsing because it's made for making business. It's made for
performers.
Financial achievements, and they have lots of people around, like owners, like people who are watching, and the players and the managers and everybody. So, and because of the bad players are kept there, everything is immediately collapsing. So I wrote about this, I think, very efficient way to explain why the labor laws are stupid.
Yes. Okay, I will see you in April when we are back in Georgia. I have to fly 25 hours that way. And Terry and I are speaking at the Students for Liberty conference in Tbilisi. Yeah. But more importantly, we're going to do important empirical research on wine.
Yes, and very interestingly, I would add to my story one thing, that Georgians love freedom. And that's why we have one of the biggest Students for Liberty chapter there.
It's huge.
Huge. Thousands of young people are attending the meetings, which is not possible in the U.S., for instance.
Yeah.
To have that many people in such.
Georgians love freedom. They love America. Not every country I visit loves Americans, and they appear to love their wine too.
Yes, absolutely.
It's ingrained. Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Yeah. Thanks for watching. If you liked the conversation, make sure to like the video, subscribe, and also ring the bell for notifications. And if you want to know more about Free the People, go to freethepeople.org.